All right, we got another Husky Huddle. We got a great one today. You
How
ready
do
to go,
I get
Steve?
production? How do I get production values like you?
You don't.
I don't have your production values are way over the top. I have nothing close to that. I think
I'll have one. I'll have one for what? Wait till I come up with the one for Husky Huddle. You should see some of the ones I have.
I think that's a missing link.
Going to the next level. Let's go, baby.
I got to get the production values.
Yeah. Well, that's all part of it. You can't have StreamYard lining above your thing saying, I work for StreamYard.
No, I got rid of that. I was able to get rid of that.
I know. Because I called you to the carpet on it. I said, what are you advertising for StreamYard?
You did. You got me to change. Yeah, I'm a slow learner, Dave. I'm a slow learner, but I do learn.
You're a fast learner.
But I do learn.
No doubt. We have a fantastic guest on today. We have Phil Hunt, legendary football player at UConn. He was maybe I want to say I think he was Shane's class, so sophomore when I was a senior, and he was on the 98 team that went 10-3. He was a starter, I think, from the time he was a redshirt freshman at UConn. So he played almost right away.
He was a captain as well. He still does. I mean, he's a leader. He's got great leadership qualities all around. So I definitely respect him and give him credit for that, because it is not easy being a leader and making sure everyone does their job and telling people what to do and putting people in the right place. And he definitely does that.
Which has landed him as the deputy chief of staff to the president now at UConn, which is we're excited about having one of our own come back to UConn and work in the office of the president, and a lot of the exciting things that are going to come from there. He was at North Dakota State before that. He worked for the NCAA.
Yep.
He's had quite a career leading up to it. He's always a great dresser. Great dresser.
Oh, he's styling to the nines.
He will not disappoint. Let's bring him on. Here we go. We got Phil Hunt. Hey, Phil, what's going on?
What's going on, guys?
Dave, I applied for Phil's job. They never called me back, so I didn't get it. I applied though. I did apply.
You applied for it. Well, okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they didn't throw your resume in the garbage though. At least, so they might have said Steve Cully. He went here.
Yeah, they got it on file somewhere.
Well, there's piles. There's two piles. They have like the candidates that are like, okay, we might be thinking about the candidates that if we don't get the guys we're thinking about, then we have that next pile. And then we have the third pile, which is no thank you pile.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So which one were you in, Steve?
Don't call us. We'll call you.
Oh, okay. That's the pile you were.
That's the pile I was in.
Phil, it's great to have you on, man. Phil's a Jersey guy, by the way, Steve. So I don't know if you know. That makes him extra special. That makes him extra special. See, he's a Jersey guy like me. And it's special in the good way, special in the good way, which means that he's got all the right qualities coming with him. When he came up to UConn, that was one of the things that Jersey guys connected very well. Because we were the stars of the team on UConn football. We had to come help out the Connecticut guys. You know what I mean, Steve? So, you're a New York guy. I mean, some of the New York guys were all right. So,
Dave, for the record, I had Phil on my podcast before you, just so you know.
Well, that's sometimes you learn from mistakes. All right, so.
We're just gonna have.
All right, Phil, please go through your background. Obviously, you can talk about your career as a player. Playing for Skip Holtz and the team you guys are on, and then obviously your career in sports and as an administrator.
Yeah, thanks guys for having me on. It's great to see you both. Always a great time when us brothers can get together and just kind of kick back and chat. And so I'm honored and humbled that you thought of me to bring me on. And Steve, this is the second time that we've chatted.
Yes.
In this particular way, you and I we remain in contact. And Shu, you're like a big brother to me, so I love you. So happy to be on here.
You're a big brother to me, Phil. Believe me, you're a big brother to me.
happy to be here. Happy to be on. And Steve, I feel like a lot has happened since I was on
Oh,
Husky
a lot
Talk.
has, absolutely.
I was yet to be in my new role. In fact, I hadn't even moved yet. I'm now in the role. I'm on week 5. I still have boxes over here in the corner. None of my stuff's on the wall. I intended to bring my UConn stuff from my house that I got nice and framed up. And actually it was going to be the 100th anniversary logo, the football guy, right? I got a nice big frame for it. It's going to be back here, but I was in a rush this morning. We had a lot of things going on, so I forgot that. But let's see. It was a long but rewarding road to get to this point.
Yes.
Happy to be back at the University of Connecticut, where I'm a double alum, undergrad and grad. Graduated in undergrad in '99. Played football with Shu. Shu was he was on my recruiting visit. I remember we were going to a basketball game that night, headed to I want to say we even headed to Hartford.
Hartford, yeah, it was Hartford. Yep.
And as the arrogant recruit that I was coming in, after we got to know each other, I said, "So Shu, how about you give up that 36, because that was my number." And he quickly reminded me that he was going to be an upperclassman and for me to slow my roll. But
that doesn't surprise me, not at all.
We had a great time. But yeah, so Jersey guy, grew up in Orange, New Jersey. Went to high school in Montclair.
Yeah.
And being a Jersey guy, I wouldn't say I was recruited heavily. I was a 2-sport guy like Shu was. Football and track were my main ones, and a hurdler like like Dave. And so had the opportunity to go to college, either on a football or track scholarship. But again, I was a football guy that ran track, right? I enjoyed track, loved doing it. But the passion was on the football field, and had some opportunities. UConn was in the mix. As I stated before, they weren't necessarily high on my list until we got the news that Skip Holtz was coming to Connecticut. And you guys know the history. I don't need to revamp all that, but there was a vision that was set by Skip, by Lou Perkins, and even by the president at the time, who was Harry J. Hartley, about where the football team program needed to go. And I'd say even today, that vision remains true. We've had success, as you guys know, as 2 successful business guys. Success isn't always linear, right? Unfortunately, that's what the fans expect. But real life doesn't always work that way. There are ups and downs with success, right? And we're trying to get back up there, because the vision is for us to have a thriving and successful program. And that doesn't just mean getting great young men in here, but that means having them graduate. That means having them be retained from year to year, but then also having success on the football field. And then once they graduate, they're out there being productive members of society, and then hopefully re-engaging or staying engaged with the institution. So, that was the plan. That's what's going on now. So after I leave, after I graduate undergrad, I stay on to go to grad school. I'm working in athletics. After that, I decide to go to law school. So I'm in law school, and then had the opportunity to go work for the NCAA. I traveled around the country. I lived in Indianapolis. I traveled around the country. I helped institutions interpret NCAA rules. I got to audit athletic programs. I got to help institutions who wanted to become NCAA member institutions with their strategic planning. Fell in love with that kind of work, but was also very interested on the academic side of collegiate athletics, and that kind of led me down the path where I am now. So got over into academic administration for a while. Shu, because we during that time, I also started my own consulting company, the Student Athlete Consulting Group, where we had helped high school and college student athletes and their families navigate NCAA rules, everything from recruiting to financial aid to all kinds of compliance issues, even some related to academics. I had to kind of leave that on the wayside because my my full-time job was starting to get demanding, and I was starting to accelerate in that area. So I had to make a choice. I stuck with the bills that were getting paid consistently, right? So I stuck with that, and it's been rewarding. Bounced around to different universities, and got to see the country. I
Yeah.
think as a Jersey guy coming in, being able to live in the Midwest, live out on the West Coast, and see different institutions, has been beneficial because you get to see how people live their lives, and you get an appreciation for the perspective of how our country functions, and the people that make up our country. And I think, as someone who works in higher ed, I think that serves me and the institution that I work at. I think it serves me very, very, very well. But have a passion for UConn, which when the opportunity came up,
Absolutely.
I applied, and now here we are. And there's some people that are still on campus from when we played, Dave. And let me tell you, and there's some things that are different. You walk around and you see all the great facilities, not just on the athletic side. I mean, the football facility is
Amazing.
phenomenal, thanks to the Burton family for their commitment to the UConn football program. But you see what's going on with basketball, you see what's going on softball and track
Baseball.
and baseball. I mean, these facilities are phenomenal. You see the new rec center, you see the new research park. It's UConn and downtown stores, right? It's phenomenal, and the sky's the limit with our institution. It's really just a matter of engaging folks to continue to believe in the vision of where we say we want to go, right? And UConn is a phenomenal institution. And again, I tell people here, yeah, we've got our challenges here, and I knew that coming in. And there are people that might be used to the golden days of UConn and UConn athletics, and they may be lamenting that for a little bit. But the truth of the matter is, even with the challenges that the institution has had, we're still on an upward trajectory.
100%.
And I, having traveled around the country, served on various boards, presented at different higher ed conferences, I'd write a list of 100 institutions right now that would trade their problems today at this instance for UConn's, hands down,
Absolutely.
right? And we've got bright, dedicated people all across this institution, and looking forward to getting to know them and getting to work with them.
Phil, the two things that I truly believe define you, number one is work ethic. You have a tremendous work ethic. There's no job too small, no job too big. You'll do whatever it takes to have success. And the other word that comes to mind is ambition. It seems like you're tremendously ambitious. You want the best wherever you're working at, whatever institution you're at, whether with the NCAA, North Dakota State, UConn. You are ambitious, and you want to get the university in the best position possible to succeed. And you want to have the student athletes, put them in the best position possible to succeed. Would you say that you have been ambitious your entire life? Is that something that's always stuck with you? Or do you think it's come on more recently?
I ambition is an interesting term, right? Because I'd say even as a kid, I wouldn't have said or thought of it as ambition. I just
Right,
always wanted to be the best person that I could be to help other people. Hard
right,
stop,
right. Yeah,
right?
yeah, right. Exactly.
And if at the end of the day it benefited Phil Hunt, then so be it, But my goal was always, how can I use my talents, my strengths, my skills to help other people,
Pay it
right?
forward.
And yeah, and pay it forward. And that's what drove me to be educated, to go to college, right? I love to learn. I mean, you look at my top 5 strengths from Strength Finder. One is achiever, the other's learner, the other one's command, right? So you say naturally, yeah, I've always been that way. I just don't know that as a kid,
Right,
especially,
right.
what those necessarily meant. I just did what I felt like I needed to do and what I was called to do. And as a young adult, as a young man coming through UConn, that's what I strived for. And we've had some success. I've had some success, but also stumbled along the way, like everybody else.
What was the key reason that you decided to come to UConn and take on this new role, and what are they kind of tasking you with?
Yeah, so
everything. No, I don't think anyone works harder or is involved in more operations than Phil. I mean,
that's a double-edged sword, man. I do want to help, but I do also need to be mindful that I don't burn myself out. Like
exactly.
that's the flip side of that coin, right? Is that you want to do everything for everyone, but you can't. I think this was just a natural trajectory for my career. I was a special assistant and university registrar at North Dakota State University, basically doing two jobs. I was helping the president there advance the strategic priorities of the institution, focusing primarily on retention of students as well as diversity, equity, and inclusion work. I served on a couple of boards within higher ed, and so this was kind of the next trajectory. I wasn't necessarily looking, but when opportunities arise, right? I happened to see that there was a position available at UConn. It was the right position at the right time.
It's all about timing.
And talked to my wife about it. It was initially a hard sell for her because she's a native Midwesterner, but coming to the East Coast, this is coming back home is what it is. But Dave, you asked, what are some of those things that I'm working on? What you guys might be the most interested in, I'll start with first, and that is I'm the president's office liaison to athletics. So David Benedict being the athletic director, he has a direct line to me. We're in conversations about, his priorities and how best to support the athletic department as a whole. I'm also tasked with helping advance the strategic priorities of the university. And there's a lot of detail that goes into that. Running an institutions of higher ed are very complex places with a lot of different constituents and a lot of different stakeholders. I'm also charged with working with our board of trustees, state legislators, alumni, donors. So there's some external facing aspects of this position as well, and then also making sure that looking for efficiencies amongst our operations, like looking to see if there are liabilities and or barriers within our own policies and procedures, and addressing those things. But ultimately, the job of a chief of staff at any level is to advance the mission and priorities of the organization and or institution for which they work.
So are you so basically your role kind of serves as that liaison for the president as well, the trustees too, or do you interact with them, or is it you interact more with the president and the president interacts with the trustees?
On a day-to-day basis, I interact more with the president.
Right.
Now, there are some initiatives that I've started to work with individual trustee members on based on their roles on the board. And so that all depends on what the initiatives are. But we've got some great trustees that are very dedicated and supported of UConn. And when they bleed blue, they bleed blue.
My very first job out of the master's program at UConn in the MBA program I worked for one of the trustees in his company down in Virginia. He's probably now more involved with the engineering department, but his name is Dr. Shinoy, and he was a proud UConn alum. And I remember when I came down, they flew me down to their interview for my second interview, and we talked about football for literally an hour and a half. And then he said, "Would you move to Virginia?" I was like, "We didn't talk about any of my skills," but it was great. He was a trustee, and I remember coming up at he would bring me up to the trustee meetings at when I was 20. Shoot, I was probably 25 years old, maybe. And so it's really, really interesting how the impact of the people around the UConn community have directly, not just on stuff like sports, but job placement, right? And I never realized when I was 25, I didn't realize how important his role is.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a role that he took very, very seriously, and I think he's still involved with the engineering department to this day somehow. But but he ended up building himself $1 billion company. So those guys have a big role in the success of different things with respect to UConn. So it's interesting that they put that. Now, was there a role like this before they established this role with you? Did they ever have this role before?
Someone in the position, yeah.
Yeah, I was curious.
Yeah. So, the coming in, the president currently has a chief of staff. I'm deputy chief of staff. We both report directly to the president. My understanding was prior presidents have had two folks supporting them in this capacity. I think the former president, right before President Merrick, they only had one. But with all the things that are going on, you need a team. You need a team of folks behind you and next to you to again make sure that things are moving forward in the right direction.
Phil, I just wanted to ask you, what are the challenges or the differences when you're working with a public university as opposed to a private university? I'm sorry, it's a dumb question.
It's really not. They're so I haven't worked for a private university or college, but what I can tell you, having worked with those folks, is that legally there are a bunch of differences between the two. Especially when you start talking about who's subject to various state and federal regulations. Resources is a big thing. The fortunate piece about being a state institution is that some of our budget, and the percentages over the years have gone down, but you still get state support,
right,
for your budget. UConn is seeing decreased state support. That's not unlike most places, though. Whereas private institutions, they're all based. Their funding, it's tuition, it's fees, and it's fundraising. Period.
Right.
It's kind of that eat what you kill mentality for some of these institutions, which is why you're seeing some institutions close now, because they haven't been able to make adjustments based on this new reality and the new market within higher education. There are some significant challenges going on right now, and you guys have probably heard this. Stop me if you have. But higher ed is seeing more scrutiny, right, from their states and even from Congress. There are more regulations now around higher ed than there ever have been. So there's accountability and oversight, which is a good thing. Okay, but that means there's eyes on you. How are you spending your money? And when you're a public institution, those are state dollars, right? And so are you being a good steward of those resources? So there's scrutiny there. You're facing demographic and enrollment cliff. The number of high school students are going down. There's not enough of the number of traditional high school students is going down every year, and it's going to be doing that over the next decade. So where are we going to pull students from? So that means we have to look to different markets and different populations to bring in students. How does that fit our strategic mission? These are questions, right? This is not just specific to UConn.
Does that mean that there's less high school students overall? Is that what you're saying? There's less.
That's correct.
Why is that? Is that people having less children? Is that what?
So a lot of that stems from the financial crisis back in 2008, right? Where families just didn't have a lot of kids, right? And then now you've got the question of the value of a higher ed education. So people are saying, well, do I want to go through it? Do I want to go into more debt, take on more debt?
Yes.
And so you've got that faced with the declining traditional high school student population.
So that includes, so you have the rising cost of college, which is a huge issue around the country, less population to pull from, and then possibly declining state aid at the same time. So then you're in that that weird quandary where you don't want to increase tuition, but you have potentially a windfall makeup that you have to have because of state aid. So it's that back and forth. And then, oh, by the way, there's athletics in the mix there, which is another
whole different
silo, right? A whole different silo, which is at some places super self-sustaining. Obviously in the deep South, state institutions, those because of football are very self-sustaining. And then in the Northeast, it's a different animal. It's some are, some aren't, right? So it's very, very interesting. So how does it's I don't know if there's an answer you have right away, but how does that start to play out for you, where you have to answer each silos? How do you think about each silo?
Well, the first thing, Dave, is that you got to break the silos down.
Right.
Okay.
You
got to break the silos down. You've got to make sure that, and this is team management, right?
Right.
And you guys know this, and this is what some of the businesses that are prospering do very well. They make sure that everybody's bought into the vision and the goals, and there's open and constant communication and transparency, not just in what the goals are, but how we're going to get there.
Yeah.
Okay. And so those are some of the things that we're going to be working on here, is just making sure look, we got to break down the silos. We got to make sure that people understand the landscape that we're in. Okay. And we can sit here and we can question, why, this happened and this and that. But the reality is it happened, and this is where we are.
Right.
Right. And as Skip used to say, right, Dave, is what's our plan? If we follow the plan, we put ourselves in the best position to be successful. Right.
Absolutely.
And so our job now is to get feedback and input, which they've already gotten. UConn's just rolled out. Here it is. They just rolled out a new strategic plan. Right. So it sets the goals and it sets the vision. The devil's in the details and how we get there. And part of my role and part of the other folks' roles that are on cabinet, on a senior leadership team, which includes the athletic director, David Benedict, is determining what are those operational tactics that are going to help us get there. But you're right. These aren't challenges that are unique to UConn. All institutions across America are looking at this. And you asked about the different constituents, right? This is why engagement of alumni is so critical to the success of universities, not just on the athletic side of the house, but across the enterprise, public-private partnerships. What are we doing within our communities? What are we doing with the business in the business sector? Are we engaging those people? And those are all priorities of our current president and things that we're currently working on. We've got some great partnerships, that affiliations right now, and we're looking to build more.
It was interesting. So when I was the biggest and you came in after this, but you obviously benefited from it during that time. When the UConn women won in 95, with Lobo, with Rebecca and that whole team, Rebecca Lobo, they piggybacked on it, and Lou Perkins did a great thing there, and Harry Hartley did a great thing, where they piggybacked on it and came up with the UConn 2000, which basically, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, basically launched us into pretty deep into the probably 2010s for UConn, right? From a financial standpoint, from an investment standpoint. And my guess is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that now we're getting ready to we have to no longer rely on what was the benefits of the UConn 2000 and bring it into a new era. And that's the part of the big transition we're in, because that was such a big commitment back then. And that also led to the stadium. I mean, it was a bunch of things that it led to. UConn football going Division I, UConn basketball going to a whole different level, which obviously it did. And then you get to the backside of it, which I call the 2010s were kind of a little bit of a dark period for football, because of the fact that so much was from that UConn 2000 program, and so much was able to piggyback off of it. And then you get into that time period where you become that in-between time period of what's next. And my assumption is that, you're part of the team that's taking on the what's next of it. But I think it's really interesting because you talked about the silos and the different constituencies. Working across the silos must be a monumental challenge in the sense that because of the UConn 2000 came towards an end, and the UConn funding challenge has been there. You have some groups that have wildly succeeded and other groups that have not. And I only know about football and basketball for the most part, but there's obviously tons of sports in UConn, and there's tons of departments. I remember the business when I was in the MBA program, we benefited from that whole project. We got a new business school and all that kind of stuff. And when I finished my MBA, my name's probably still in there. Everyone got to sign their name on that building there. But it's very interesting because the business school was having wild success when I was there, and then there are other departments that were not, right. And so I think that must go across all different types of things. What is it like kind of taking that UConn 2000, moving into the new era? And am I right about that? And then now you're working across silos where some guys are really successful and they're like, hey, don't touch my area. We're great, right? And other groups are like, hey, my area is not as good and we need some help.
Yeah, that might be that's a longer conversation than we probably have. And these are some of the things that when I
perfect. We'll have you back on, Phil. Perfect.
When I've done presentations at different conferences, this is some of the stuff that I talk about. Where do I even begin? Yeah, here's the thing. UConn has experienced a lot of success, right? Rightfully so, and well deserved, given the amount of investment and given the amount of hard work people have put in over decades. With that raises your profile, that raises expectations, that raises costs, right? Because in order to get more students, you got to attract more students, right? You raise your profile, you attract highly ranked faculty, highly skilled staff. That all comes with a cost. You got to pay these people. You got to attract them to come. You got to attract students, right? You got to have facilities. You got to have the faculty. You got to have the right programs. That's another big conversation that's happening across, and it gets into the philosophical debate about the purpose of education, right? Is it
like an arms race,
job? Right.
Yeah.
Is it to get a job, or is it to become a learned individual? Well, it's both. It's not one or the other. It's both, right? At the end of the day, I have to put food on my table. It's just like you guys got to put food on your table, right? And the best way to do that, as the research has shown, is to get a college education. The question though is it the right education considering where the markets are, where are the in-demand jobs? Exactly. And all the literature right now is saying that in order for higher ed institutions one of the methods and tactics to survive over this next decade or so is that higher ed institutions need to be very mindful of their consumer choice and consumer demand. The consumer choice and consumer demand. Who are our consumers? It's the parents and the students, right?
Right.
And if they're saying they want to go in to get degrees in those in-demand jobs, then the question is, how many of those in-demand jobs do we have within our academic program portfolios?
Right.
Phil,
I'm sorry to cut you off. I had wanted to ask you, I think it was like starting a few years ago, UConn statewide had been operating at a big deficit. And has that gotten better over the last few years? I mean, because they were really in the red, but they have started to climb out of it. I had thought. Yeah, it's just taking time.
Yeah, and I can't get into great detail because I wasn't here during that time, but my understanding is that there was a deficit. Through through the leadership that went on at the governor's level and the representatives in the state legislature, they put plans together to get us out of that, and we're out of it. But I think the lesson there is, how do we make sure that doesn't happen again? And so that's part of some of the oversight and accountability.
UConn is interesting because when I went to UConn, and probably the same as when you came out, there were very few people that I knew. I mean, there was no one from there was one person in the history of my high school that had gone to UConn. And he loved it, by the way. He used to actually come up. He didn't even have a child that was there. He would come up and he would take me out to lunch and stuff like that. And I happened to go to school in high school with his daughter, but it was, I was the only person. But, post me in the 2000s, there were lots of people from my high school that went to UConn. Lots. Okay. I won't say, I went to a small high school, so it wasn't like, 10 a year, but you had a person every year, a couple of people every year going to UConn. So the profile of the university significantly shifted from the time when I got recruited, probably when you got recruited. I mean, but it was starting to change when you were getting recruited because Skip was coming in. But when I got recruited, when UConn came, like, I didn't even know what it was, you know what I'm saying? So, that was a big change in the profile of the university. It's obviously a top 25 public school educationally. That obviously is part of the change that's really happened. But I was curious as to kind of how Connecticut versus out of state is, because the Northeast has had in general population drop, right? Which you talked about, and high schools dropping. So is UConn beginning to try and make that up from pulling from around the country? Because obviously it costs more to go out of state, or is it trying to stay true to more of its in-state kind of culture that it's always had?
Our priority, Dave, is always going to be focusing on what's right here in our backyard, right? Okay. And so, Connecticut residents, this is a home for you, right? We want our folks to stay in state and to come to the University of Connecticut, and for that to be their home. Recognizing that, though, we still also need to know that there are other opportunities out there to attract students. And yeah, UConn does get a lot of out-of-state students, right? We can't just remove out-of-state students from the mix and think that we're going to be a thriving institution. It's not going to happen. It doesn't serve the institution well. It doesn't serve the state well. We need people to come in, and the hope and the plan is we're working with the state and working with business leaders. How do we keep the students here that we get?
Right.
So when you get somebody from out of state, how do you get it to come in? Look, Dave, you know this. When we were playing, there were guys that came here that would hem and haw about being in Connecticut, and Connecticut's this, Connecticut's that. Some of those same guys, they got married and they're raising their kids right here in the good old state of Connecticut. Right. And it blows my mind. But there's a lesson in that. Right. That if you engage people in meaningful ways that are relevant to them, they will stay, and they will love it, and they will learn to love it and understand all the great things that this state has to offer. So those are the conversations that we're having on our campus about, how do we attract, more residents of Connecticut, but then also, out of state residents as well to come to UConn and stay, right? And be productive members of the workforce here.
Yeah,
it seems like there's a similarity too there with like you see some of the schools like North Carolina is big with that, right? They have a huge, obviously gigantic in-state population, but do a great job of bringing great out-of-state applicants in. And for University of Virginia does that. UConn has done that. It wasn't as big when I was coming in, but it kept growing as I got later and later, in the university there. And I think that's kind of continued. I think it's also the hallmark of a lot of top-rated educational public institutions. You see that you have that in-state population that is your core, that you're always going to serve. You want to make sure that you get the very best students you can from that population, and you get a wide base of students from that population. But at the same time, you also attract the unique students from around, maybe, I guess, the Northeast or the East Coast, or maybe even stretches into the Midwest. I'm not sure, but regionally around the country. Has that been part of the because UConn is, when I first came there, it was considered a good school, not an elite school, and that now it's a top 25 public school around the country. That's a huge jump. That's a huge. I would say we were probably top 75 when I first got there, right? And obviously that's a huge leap, right? And Northeast schools in general are always a little bit higher up on the rung to start with, but just because there's a in general, though, it's changed dramatically around the country, but in general, you always had a large college base to begin with. Talk a little bit about that jump educationally with UConn.
Yeah, look, right now go ahead. So
we're on par with Boston College now. I mean, that's how strong we've grown academically. We're on par with BC, which, nobody thought was possible. And that's what we've done. And that's the success that we've had and the growth that we've had. And I think that's incredible because everyone wanted to be BC. We now are comparable and academically just as strong as Boston College.
Look, the value, since we graduated, Dave, the value of our degree and or degrees has grown exponentially. Right. And the institution has done a great job moving up in the rankings. Our president right now, she pays particular attention to the rankings, as she understands that's what's helping to inform families' choices of where to send their students. Now, rankings are starting to fluctuate, right? And starting to be weighted a little differently. And we're having conversations about, how that impacts us and what does that look like moving forward. And it's going to inform some of our decision making, clearly. It's not going to be ultimately the driving factor, but it's going to have some things for us to be mindful of as we continue to maneuver. But that's what we want, right? Yeah. Isn't that's what we all want as alums, as we all want as people who care deeply about this institution and the value of education for our students. We want to be perceived, and we want it to be realized, right? The value of higher education and how we're seen across the country and across the globe, right? We want UConn to be a highly prestigious, well-viewed institution that when you come out and you have a UConn degree, that means something. Out in the real world and out in the workforce. And, I think there's a study out. If there's not a study, somebody needs to commission a study. But there might be one. I don't know the last time it was done, but you look at, there's a correlation, and a lot of people know this, especially in the admissions world and the enrollment world. There's a correlation between athletic success and notoriety with admissions applications.
No doubt.
You apply 100%.
No doubt. I think there is some studies that have been done on that. There's no doubt.
The applications go sky high when you win.
Right.
No doubt. And you know what there'll be a correlation with? And this is my plug, so you could take it for what it's worth, Phil. Correlation between an on-campus football stadium.
Oh, geez,
there it is, folks.
There it is. There it is for you. That's my 2-second plug. Okay.
I like the tailgate at Regular Field.
As that stadium rises, I see it from driving in, off the exit 68 or whatever, 67 or whatever it is. I see the monolith. I see it. I see it, Phil. I see it. If you build it, they will come. No.
No, but
I don't want to hold you, Phil, but I had to get that in because I know I got to get it call. I had to tease Kyle with some different stuff when I had Kyle Muncie on, but go ahead, Steve.
I just wanted to ask you, because looking at the schedule this year, the football schedule, I think this is the first time in the last, 3 or 4 years we can compete and win. We're not playing teams that are all above us. We are playing teams that we are competitive with, and we can really go out and have a successful season and win 6, 8, 9 games. I think that's really possible. And the expectations are there. We're not playing the Michigans, the Clemsons, the Tennessees. We don't have to do that. We have a schedule with teams we can compete with, and I think that's going to make a huge difference with our football program.
Yeah, without a doubt. And you guys know that these schedules are made, years
in
in
advance.
advance, and hopefully we reap the benefit of whatever minds were behind the creation of this upcoming schedule. The point that I was trying to make, and hopefully I get to bring this home now about success in athletics. There even, it happened when we were enrolled, and even today there's still questions, especially now that, looking at resources, and there's high competition for resources, right? Is that what's the value of an athletic program? What's the value of an athletic program at UConn? What's the value of supporting UConn football, right? The reality is that in the United States, there's a high value to athletic prowess.
Absolutely.
Like it or not,
billion-dollar industry.
That is the culture that we're in. And exactly right. There are billions of dollars associated with sports and athletics. And athletics is the front porch of any college and university. Like it or not, that's the reality that we're in. And when you look at an athletic program like UConn's success is closely linked and closely tied to its success in athletics. You can't extrapolate the two. You just can't.
You're 100% right.
And so that means,
listen, your son's a fantastic athlete, right? And and I have a son that's I think a year older. Your son is 8 or not, 9?
He's 7.
7. Oh, my
so your
son's 9,
10,
right?
He's 2 years older.
So what I think has changed dramatically too, to your point, is not only is it front porch to every university, it's the front porch to every family. Okay, some form of it, and it's the front porch to every town. It's the front porch to every high school, and it's become that way. And I guess you could almost argue that I don't know which came first, it pushing in this direction or that direction, but it's become that way. And the number of athletes, the number of people that participate in athletics at the younger ages has skyrocketed. And it does, obviously everything comes to, as you go to high school and college, it starts to become like a pyramid, right? And different levels. But as far as the importance of it, and I always think that it, the NFL does a great job of this, right? They do a great job of trying to create fans from the time the athletes are very young. That's why they have NFL flag, and that's right. So I think they understand that very, very well, because they're not just participating in athletics. They become lifelong athletics fans, not just participants, right? And I think that that's an interesting thing that's happened dramatically in the last 30 years in the United States over what it had been in the past. In the past, I remember this. There were kids that were good athletes in my high school that would have been good athletes, but they had to go work. Like, they literally had to go get a job. Like, they had to go support their family. They could not participate in athletics. Now we figured out a way for a lot of more people to be able to participate, even if they have those kind of situations. There's so many more programs. Is that something that, am I wrong on that? Or
no, you're right on that. But then I also, and there's a yes and added to that is, we talk about the value, is think about where we are in our lives. How many lessons were you able to, that you learned in football, that you were able to apply to some kind of challenge or time in your life that helped you get through it?
Agreed.
There's a reason why former athletes, current athletes are getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to come speak to businesses, because there's a certain mindset, right? That if you hone it and you develop it, is very valuable outside of athletics.
Great
Right.
point. Very,
And
very, very.
so,
And
you
the
know,
parents are trying to get their kids to learn those lessons because you not only academically you learn certain lessons, and athletically you learn some similar lessons, but also different lessons, right? Because there's physical parts to it yet that you have to fight through.
And there's value to both.
Right. Absolutely. 100%.
There's value to both. So look, guys, this was
I
fun. I
let
gotta
you
get
go.
going. This was fun. All right, you challenged me to hopefully come on again. I probably enjoyed this more than I should have, but you guys are awesome. I hope you keep this going, and hope that you get some other alumni athletes on here to kind of share their stories, share their experience. The university wants to hear from you. We appreciate what you're doing. You know, have folks get in contact with us, but I'm sure I'll be in contact with the two of you soon.
Yeah.
Well,
Phil,
great job. It was thanks so much for coming on and being candid and you know answering some difficult questions, man. We're excited to have you in our corner.
Phil, just for the record, I didn't ask as many questions, but my questions were better.
That's because you're scared, Steve. So don't worry about it. You're scared of Phil. Just admit it, and then we'll go from there. Just teasing.
All right.
Thanks,
Well, I hope to
I'm
see
a
you
rough one,
guys.
Phil. You know, Phil knows me for a long time.
I hope to see you guys at a handful of games this season.
Oh, you will. Don't worry. We
All right.
appreciate it.
All right,
Thank you,
We'll
guys.
see
Phil.
you soon, Phil. Thanks so much.
See ya.
All
Take
right.
care.
No, that was great. That was great. That was great. Oh man. See,
Awesome.
I had to tease you, Steve. I had to tease you because you know
No,
what? I guess if I'm the older brother, then you're the younger brother, right? So
I'm the youngest one out of both of you. I'm the little guy.
Right, wait. So how old are you? How old are you now?
42.
Oh, you're 4. Oh yeah, you're definitely. So right. So Phil must be
Phil is
46?
45, I think.
45. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Phil's 45. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm on my way 5 more years. I can go and even though I won't
You're
because
gonna get your AARP card.
I get my AARP card and I can go in those 55 and older homes if I wanted to. You know what I mean?
Just not in Worcester. Just not in Worcester. We can't say.
Well, listen, Worcester. I could be the mayor of Worcester if I wanted to now.
I emailed Phil last night, and I emailed him the show that you put on for Maria, and I showed him the number of views that we got. And I said, you have a built-in platform with us. And like Dave has 1 million subscribers.
On his way to 1 million. On his way.
You're gonna have 1 million. I said he can put this on and get 10,000 views, and he's gonna show it 2 more times. You know, you could get up to 50,000 views, you get 100,000 views, and then you have my stuff. I think because of the visibility I'm getting from you, my listenership has gone up. I think by the end of September, I'll have 200,000 listeners per
That would
episode.
be amazing.
So I said it makes complete sense. Use us, partner with us, Husky Huddle, Husky Talk. I said, if you want to do the sponsorship model, we can go out and get sponsors. We can go out and get sponsors very
well. Let's talk some of that off air, because we're on air, and
I'll just delete it. Yeah, I didn't know.
So, but yeah, no, I'll tell you from this what I learned from Phil, and then I'm going to go off air here first in a second. What I really learned from Phil, which was really interesting, is this. UCONN, and I don't. You were after this part, but the UCONN 2000, which we built,
that's what I was part of. I was there during.
Yeah, you were a benefiter from the UCONN 2000.
Yes.
I was at the beginning of that, like it got approved, and then I was pretty much done. I think a year or two later. But I think that's the interesting thing that I think Phil has going on there, that they have that transition going on, and I think there's a lot of things from an opportunity standpoint that Connecticut will be able to dive into, which are unique. And so I think that's going to come on board. I thought Phil did a great job. Let's get off this podcast, and then
go ahead.
Me and you could talk some more here. So all right, we'll see you all next time for Husky Huddle.